I first thought about writing a book like this early in the 21st century. Back then, the idea of stepping outside a national framework seemed more daring than it does today, when global is a cliché and transnational has become an academic buzzword, an adjective sprinkled into a grant application to lend it spice. Among the early advocates of a supranational history, the feeling of challenging the common sense of the time was powerful and the language correspondingly fierce. There was talk of rescuing history from the nation. Contemporary events have obviously helped to drive this turn away from more narrowly defined national histories. Globalization underlined the importance of cross-border movements, flows, exchanges, and networks, all the terms that have become familiar in our lives. To this, we can add the present post-colonial reckoning with empire and race. Debates about the return of museum holdings like the Benin bronzes, including the hundreds in the Berlin Ethnological Museum, have had their effect on how we think about European history. So has the fact that major European cities have large populations of colour, often marginalised and alienated, who are there as a result of imperialism. That has redirected British, French and Dutch history into promising new channels. And Germany. Its formal colonial empire was short-lived, 1884 to 1918, but it lasted long enough to feature two genocidal African wars that some historians have linked to the Holocaust. Colonies also had a place in the German imagination long before they existed in reality, and long after they disappeared. The colonial dimension of German history deserves the attention it is now receiving, and receives in my book. When I first thought about writing the book, I was responding, in part, to issues like these. For all history is contemporary history. But history also moves to its own rhythms. What really drew me was trying to think through what it would mean to write a history that did not take the nation for granted as the unquestioned framework. I have long been intrigued by the idea of playing with scales. Turn the magnification up on a place or an event, and you see things previously invisible. But turn your gaze in the other direction to look at very large processes, and you also notice patterns previously invisible. These two alternatives to the national frame, the micro and the macro, are not mutually exclusive. The worldwide does not abolish the local, said the French philosopher Henri Lefebvre. The two often come together in this book, the historian's version of what business people call glocalization. Let me give an example. I'm interested in the fine-grained detail of how commodities moved across borders, because their movements are so eloquent. Think of the mercury that was mined in 16th century Spain under the auspices of a German merchant house, shipped across the Atlantic on special boats, and carried on mule trains up mountain trails to the mines of Potosi, where it was used to separate silver from rock. The silver was then shipped back to Europe, where it lubricated local trade, or was sent on Manila galleons to the Philippines, thereby linking European, American, and Asian trade circuits. This book is filled with commodities, from pepper, spices, diamonds, pearls, coffee, sugar, tobacco, and so on, through the colonial goods of the 19th century and the cornucopia of cars, washing machines, and the other advertisers' dream products of the 20th. Traced from place of origin to point of consumption, they reveal a lot about status, power, gender, and much else, from science to fashion. The resistance to commodities also has a lot to say to us. Long before the Nazis' notorious policies of economic self-sufficiency, we encounter hostility to pepper and spices in the 16th century, coffee in the 18th century, and imported grain and meat in the 19th century. This book will tell you why.